Today's guest is Nico Johnson. He is a thought leader in the solar industry, an OG, as you might call it. Nico helps entrepreneurs, executives, and high-achieving sales professionals achieve more in their business and personal growth. The Joe Rogan of solar, his SunCast Podcast is required listening for anyone in the solar industry. He interviews and connects thought leaders in the industry. The weekly show now has a global audience and is approaching 300,000 downloads in 4.5 years. Now it's his turn to be interviewed. Thanks for joining us and welcome to the show, Nico.
Man, Les, it's really an honor to join your show. I'm always a huge fan of anyone who is putting themselves out there and creating content. And it's funny. I'm laughing over here to hear me being called the Joe Rogan of solar. I have obviously a lot of respect for that guy. But we've been at this for a little while, and it's a lot of fun, man. What you guys are doing with the Energy Independence Show is phenomenal, and it embodies the kind of hustle that I've loved watching, especially through this pandemic, of folks just jumping in and doing what it takes to help others come along the education curve. So kudos to you guys too, man. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an honor to have you, and I'd like your wife to know we're very thankful for you taking the time. I know you guys are sheltering in place also. And so we definitely appreciate you and your wife.
Everybody's shouldering their part of the burden, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're all getting by and we're all in it together. So question one, Nico, is can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what motivates you in the solar industry?
Absolutely. 14 and a half years now, coming up on 15 years in the solar industry, and broader sort of clean energy business. We didn't call it the energy transition back then. Started my own solar company and have just worked my way up in the industry, man. And what motivates me about this industry is not only that we have the impact capacity of $1 trillion plus industry, as my friend Jigger says, it's, creating climate wealth is the next wave of innovation. Right. Beyond, the internet, like dealing with energy and water are the two biggest critical infrastructure efforts that can be undertaken by our generation and the next. So what motivates me is helping people, not only inside of the industry, but outside of the industry, really learn what it is we're trying to accomplish and find their way into the industry and ascend up through the industry, finding their role as an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur, a key contributor on a team, or building their own company.
Right. It's funny you brought that up. I kind of joke, I say, electricity is man's greatest scientific achievement. And it led to the age of information. And now we're all connecting together and advancing that further down the road. And I'm saying that the electricity and the age of information are making grandbabies, which is renewable energy. So it's really exciting to see the progress, especially in challenging times.
Absolutely. Well, everything is, everything is energy, right? Even information is energy. Where you point your thoughts and time is energy. So the way that we transmit, create, and consume information, that itself is energy. So we are in a very real way curators of energy, and you and I, through our business, get to help others curate their information and direct their energy to a more sustainable platform. That's Absolutely. One of the things that just it continues every day to inspire me about what we do.
Yes, it's especially inspiring lately. I call it the solar silver lining. Question two is, can you tell us about your SunCast podcast and your efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a business called SunCast Media, which essentially started 4.5 years ago, as you mentioned, as a podcast. We like to say it's essential listening, but at the time, there were a handful, Barry, Cinnamon, me, the Energy Gang. There were, just a handful of us that were podcasting in any form or fashion about solar. And it slowly began to build momentum thanks to some great friends, like I mentioned, Jigger and Dan Sugar, a host of others. Julia Ham at SEPA has just been so gracious with her time, such that we have learned an incredible amount about the ways that the key leaders in the solar industry are thinking about the energy transition. So we spend a lot of time in the SunCast podcast helping folks sort of disintermediate, like what's happening versus what could happen. How did people get to where they are? Les, how did you come about the business that you're carrying forward there in Bakersfield? And then broadly, SunCast has grown into a full-blown media company. We do, as you know, a lot, just like you guys do, we do a lot of LinkedIn Lives now, a lot of webinars. And we help our clients think about product market fit, which, as my mentor, John Bonanno at New Energy Nexus says, is the core exercise that every entrepreneur has to nail, right? If you can't get product market fit, you don't have a business. And the whole reason that a pivot exists is because there wasn't product market fit. There is a mission and a vision, but the strategy to achieve it changes, right? Because you need to find that product market fit. So we spend a lot of time helping clients think through that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Barry Cinnamon. I worked at Akina Solar as a college student in 2007, I believe.
That?
Learned a lot about giving seminars, and it really was necessary at the time. But now energy storage and these challenging times really have brought us to the web. So it's kind of full circle, pretty interesting, and it's nice to have you and see, to do business or to communicate with an OG. Question number 3 is, in these challenging times, how has the solar industry proven its resilience?
The solar industry is one of those industries that it's an infrastructure industry. So resilience takes on different formats. There's resilience of the energy itself, which we're all talking about energy storage and providing ancillary services to the web. Companies like Sunrun have really brought our industry up to the next level with being able to provide those ancillary services as a real true service that's paid for, right? That we can monetize. That's one element of how we've proven our resilience, which is to say that we've grown into an industry where we have publicly traded companies, we have financeable products, we have categorizations of our industry. But also, if you look at the pandemic and the resilience required to get through a real, challenging time for every company, our industry was one of the fastest I've seen pivot towards the online sales model. Everything from training to conferences. You're probably aware that we did a summit and we participated in, maybe we'll talk about this, we participated in the Midwest Solar Expo that was all virtual. I've been so amazed and really, my belief in our industry as a very resilient by nature industry was supported through seeing efforts like solar.com constantly checking in with their constituents and reporting that back to the industry. Jan at Solar Wake Up doing sort of a census of the industry and reporting that back. Our resilience is demonstrated by the close-knit nature of our industry, that despite being hundreds of thousands of individual contributors, we still act like a spider web. You pull one end and everyone feels it on the other end, right? For good and for bad, but we also pull together, and we'll talk some more about how pulling together in this time has really contributed to the industry thriving and moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very inspiring. I wrote an article about it, and I referenced some of your work and the virtual aspect of it, and as a form of inspiration to show the solar silver lining. And now question 4, can you tell us about how participants responded to innovation like going virtual during this time?
Yeah, absolutely. Most recently, we participated with Jake and the Antenna Group folks in the Midwest Solar Expo, which isn't an Antenna Group product, but they were highly involved. Jake Rosemarin as one of the key contributors there. They did something that's unique in and of itself. They hosted it on this platform that is a virtual platform where we created avatars and we sort of occupied a virtual space. I was just speaking with someone a couple of hours ago about how by and large, everyone I talked to, despite the friction up front to actually engage in, download an app, figure out the comms, make sure your audio is working, it was not without its problems. To a person, I haven't talked to a single person that didn't say, wow, that was a cool experience. This challenged the way I think about meetings and flying and like having an office. I, as a test inside of that platform, invited several people into kind of a private office and had meetings. Mm-hmm. And the really interesting thing is I've been doing Zoom calls for 4 years. It's one of the ways I record the podcast. I experienced something that I didn't expect. Face-to-face, as it were, with an avatar where I can't see the person behind the avatar. I felt just as engaged as though I were in a face-to-face meeting, even to such extent that I wasn't checking messages. I wasn't disengaged in some other way just because I was looking through a screen. So there's an element to the virtual world that we're now able to inhabit that it pulls on a thread that I haven't quite been able to figure it out yet, psychologically, subconsciously, that they're intrigued by. Is it going to push people away? Yes, some. But what I've seen is that the virtual summit that we hosted for 3 days, we had over 1,500 registrants. Midwest Solar Expo had a huge attendance. And everyone I've talked to says, oh my gosh, this is the future. It's more than a webinar, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it expounds on our ability to create connection, which at the end of the day is what it's what great sales organizations are built around. Can you create connection? What value are you creating? And how do you remain relevant to your audience?
Yeah, it was really innovative. And speaking of the psychology behind it, I saw that there were some people that were excited to dance. And so there was dancing going on. And I don't imagine that would be the case at a normal conference. So in many ways, it could be more fun. So that's really...
Yeah, you let your hair down. Yeah, it was funny. Yeah. On stage, people were dancing. I hosted 4 sort of events there. We had a SunCast daily show every day. We had a pre-show, and I did a panel. And in every single one of those, somebody on stage used that like dance function and samboed around the room. So I agree with you, man. Like, inhibitions are lowered. I feel like people come more willing to expose themselves. And, at the end of the day, that's a part of the relationship that we're all building.
And also, without, having to do your hair, maybe you're not wearing pants or whatever it may be. I mean, you could get on there virtually. And,
it was a much lower bar, I can tell you. Prepping for my SunCast summit back in April, I shaved, fixed my hair, right? I was literally in front of the camera for 9 hours without stop. And the summit for Midwest Solar Expo was a completely different experience. As you mentioned, like, I didn't shave. I wasn't concerned about what shirt I was wearing. And it was an equally fruitful and useful and meaningful experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, Carter Levin will be on tomorrow. And he mentioned, he's from the California Solar and Storage Association. He mentioned that he's going to have to do his hair, and he's excited about getting dressed up. So, it's kind of neat.
Well, there's that. Yeah, there's that
in place, but it's fun time.
I'm looking. He's got to trim his hair back so he can put his yarmulke on. I'm a big fan of Carter, and I'll be tuning in to see that episode. Big ups to Carter.
Well, question number 5 is, what role does passion play in the success of the solar industry?
Oh man, I'm going to be a bit of a naysayer here, and probably toe the line with my friend Jigger, which is to say, like, passion. A lot of folks bandy around this term, passion. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who, in some way, are passionate about what they do, but this is like marriage. There's going to be a night when you're married that you roll over and you look at your partner and you ask yourself, why am I still here? Or you ask yourself, why did I make this decision, right? And that last word is the important thing, right? I think that entrepreneurship in particular is a decision. It's not a passion, because at the end of the day, it's grit and determination that get you where you want to go. Zig Ziglar says, everybody wants freedom. And I equate freedom to passion. They're often used synonymously almost. Everybody wants freedom, but if you take a train off of the tracks, it's free, but it can't go anywhere. Right. So passion for me is about finding where how you're going to express yourself. Gary Vaynerchuk says, how you make your money is more important than how much you make. But at the end of the day, like that, the grit and determination and the decision to move forward is far more important than the passion.
Absolutely. Well, my buddy Dan Schulman at Schulman Advisory Group over in Japan mentioned bootstrapping grit, and I'd never heard that term before, and it really intrigued me, and I really appreciated those words. So I also, it's nice to hear you use the word grit, because I do think that in these challenging times, it takes grit. On question number 6, who are some of the leaders who have inspired and amazed you?
Yeah, well, I feel like Ty Lopez sometimes when I'm on these, when I'm having these calls, because I, like him, and we were both from North Carolina, I'm constantly shouting out authors and business leaders and their quotes. But quotes for me have been something that carry me, and so you've already heard a few of the folks that I aspire to build my life in a similar fashion. in the solar industry, without a doubt, some of the guys that have inspired me that have also been guests on my podcast are Jigger Shaw and Dan Sugar. I think that they are sort of quintessential entrepreneurial figureheads. Barry Cinnamon's another who took massive risk early in this industry. I remember in 2006 building my solar company, competing against Akina. And when I started winning business from Barry, I was like, that for me was like, things are working, things are going right. So these are some of the leaders who very specifically have inspired me. Frankly, the Rive brothers have inspired me, what they were able to accomplish with Solar City. Like, whatever your philosophy about Solar City, I had a conversation in 2009 at Solar Power Long Beach with Peter Rive, and I said, what's different? How can you possibly, with $10 million from your cousin, acquire 3 local electrical companies and expand across the entire state of California in 18 months? And he said, systems. And that never left my mind. He said, we have the best operational systems in the industry, and it's all built on software. I know where everything is every minute of the day, and I know every dollar that's attached to it. And that was when I knew that our industry was about to get really serious. And that is inspiring, because if you aspire to grow in an industry that's going to become $1 trillion industry, you need serious players who have real plans. And Barry took his company public. I remember Steve, the guy Steve Vella, who started Acro Electric. They were one of my subcontractors when I was first doing my resi installs. He took his company public, sold it, and watching these guys grow a business for 30 years and then have a harvest and also impact many lives. On a separate level, not in the solar industry, quick answers are Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins are my personal kind of gurus, Dean Jackson, for how to think about building an organization and motivating sales. And then my all-time sort of, if I could sit down and have dinner with one person, it would be Andrew Carnegie. He has a quote that says, "Do not look for the approval, except for the consciousness of doing your best." So I think living people, it would be Richard Branson. And I'll have a quote later for you that I'll share if we have any time to talk about it. But
absolutely,
these are some of the guys that really inspire me, that there was no there wasn't a tip to the skis that they could get over, right? Like, they were constantly leaning as far forward as they could.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny you mentioned Barry Cinnamon and his first publicly traded company, Solar, Akina. I actually learned a lot from the system and learned a lot from presenting to the public at the time and teaching people about solar, even though I was new to it. You kind of really, cut your teeth when you get thrown crazy questions from the crowd. So, but the system and the process that he developed really did help me later on become an entrepreneur myself. So I appreciate to see and for all and every one of us to benefit from the systematic grit and determination to bring the solar revolution to the masses. So on question number 7, as a successful solarpreneur yourself, what are your proudest accomplishments?
It's funny you talk about systems. I'm not a particularly systems oriented thinker. And so I've had to hire out folks to help me with my systems. Hat tip to my team, Alex and Ludovic. Anybody who's ever interacted with SunCast in the last 3 years knows those 2 names, because they are instrumental to the way that we show up as a brand. From a proudest moments, man, and accomplishments, I'm my biggest critic, so I never really look, and I do take some time to say, oh, I hit a milestone, and to reflect and to celebrate with my family or with a couple of friends. If I said I'm proud of anything, it would be that SunCast is recognized at all. I had a moment in August where a buddy of mine called me and he goes, what I think that you don't realize is that SunCast is your main hustle, and all this other stuff that you do that you think people see you as in the marketplace, that's all side hustle stuff for us. You're SunCast. And that blew my mind. And this is 3 and almost 4 years into my project called SunCast. So I'm super proud of the reach you mentioned. We're coming up on 300,000 downloads. We've got thousands of downloads. I mean, we hit 12,000 downloads a month on the podcast catalog. But I fundamentally believe the podcast doesn't work without one of my favorite tropes, which is your network is your net worth. And I built the podcast on the back of having spent 15 years really investing in the lives of men and women that I wanted to get to know. And that network has supported and elevated the work that we're doing because they graciously give of their time. And if there is a sort of a fruit of that, a physical representation of that, it's the 3 or 4 or 5 emails that I get a month from someone who says, Nico, thank you. I got a job because I listened to SunCast. Right? Like my hairs are standing up on my arm right now.
Ooh,
like that really is meaningful. When someone says the work that you did helped me, that's a proud accomplishment. And that's what we lean into now at SunCast, is helping others figure out that path, right? So I think that's where I get so much value from the work that we've been doing.
Well, you're kind of the gold standard. You were an OG, and you are the Joe Rogan of solar. And I would posit that nobody knows what other businesses Joe Rogan owns or what he does in his spare time. All they know is that Joe Rogan's podcast is pretty awesome. And I would say the same thing about you, and I would give you credit for some of the information and knowledge that I learned. So I really appreciate your podcast, and I encourage our listeners to check it out. And I would add that people, since we started doing this show during the pandemic, have really contacted us from all over the world saying, hey, keep it up. I'm inspired. I'm thinking about starting a business. Hey, I'm in Puerto Rico. How do we deal with hurricanes and all these different things?
That's amazing.
It's really neat. And so I have a feeling that I'll be in a similar position. And I believe we'll be going on the radio here soon, which will bring the
very exciting.
Yeah, the show to a broader audience. And I'm very excited about that. So there's really good things coming out of the pandemic. And again, that's the solar silver lining. So again, I really appreciate your podcast. And again, I encourage people to listen to it. It's a must do for solar professionals. So on question number 8, what advice do you have for people aspiring to enter the solar industry? Speaking of some of those people that you've helped.
Well, look, I genuinely consider that the work I do is curating great thoughts of others and great advice of others. I can point to so many people who are doing such great work. There's a couple of core things, and I'm going to be self-referential in terms of the podcast because I can direct folks to that as a resource. We did an episode with John Chimanis back in November. I think it's episode 196. And he said something that I've found myself saying probably dozens of times since then. He says, if you're going to transition into an industry, he said, if you're going to change jobs, you can do one of 2 things. You can change industry or you can change skill set, but you should not ever try to do both at the same time. Okay. So for those of you who are trying to get into the solar industry, whatever it is that is your thing, that you're a mechanic, be a mechanic in the solar industry. You're a finance bean counter, be a bean counter in the solar industry. All the other stuff will work itself out. Like if you're really trying to get into the industry and you do have a core skill set, which if you don't think you do, I can help you figure that out. That's for sure. But don't change those 2. Like those 2 vertices can't cross right now. You need to focus on taking your skills into our industry because we have a booming industry and we have a need for you. There is a lot of work and many hands make light work, as the Bible says. So we need you to lean in with the skills that you have right now. Don't try to change to be an operations person when you've been an inside salesperson. Just stick to your knitting right now and jump into the solar industry. And for those who are already in the solar industry, maybe got here a year or 2 ago and you're thinking about moving up, now's the time to start thinking, okay, I'm in finance, but I really want to look at marketing or I really want to look at some other element of the business. Now's the time to really start thinking, how do I go up that curve? We have a Facebook group called the Clean Energy Guild. I don't know, Les, if you're a member of it, but
I'm going to be. I'll find it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to find on Facebook. Just search Clean Energy Guild. In there are hundreds of solar professionals where you can ask that advice. You can pose a question. What's the most important skill? What jobs are offered? We do private consulting and coaching with folks all the time, coming from oil and gas, coming from high tech, who are saying, hey, I really want a job, but I want a side door into the industry. I don't really want to start at the bottom as an intern. What are my transferable skills? So we work with people all the time to think about these things. But getting into the industry, there's just so much opportunity. So if you're aspiring to enter into the industry, decide, are you an entrepreneur or are you going to be an internal team member at a corporation? Whichever path you choose, that's fine. In the guild, we have all types. But the skill set required to build an entrepreneurial business is different than the skill set required to just move over into and serve an organization that already has a mission, and you're going to add to their, you're going to get on the bus as Jim Collins says, right? Because every good organization needs the right people on the bus. That's what I would say to someone wanting to get in the solar industry.
Right, absolutely. And we also have a Facebook page, Energy Independence Group, and we're on LinkedIn. We encourage people to find us there and join in conversation like with yours. It is very inspiring to see the light bulb go off for people. And I would also say that from my experience, because people ask me all the time, how did they get into the industry? Doesn't matter what you do, and I would encourage them to take your advice. But I would also add that whatever you do in the solar revolution is going to make a difference in the world. So we encourage you to be proud of whatever you choose to do. Question number 9 is, what do you think the future of solar and energy looks like?
Oh, wow. So I ask this every week on our podcast, what's the crystal ball? And so I've got a lot of different answers for this. My personal belief is that solar, energy broadly is going to transition to what we refer to, or what in particular SEPA refers to as zero carbon. We're going to move away from, as predominant or baseload, any form of fossil fuel generation, ideally in the next 20, 30 years. But by the time my children are philosophizing about this, they won't be talking about solar as an up-and-coming brand, right? Solar will be the dominant form of energy generation in the world. And that's why this is such a transformative opportunity. What's really interesting, however, is why solar will become the dominant form of generation, because storage, right?
Right. So, I'm glad you said that. Thank you so much. Continue.
So this goes back to your previous question. If you want to get in the solar industry and you're not coming from the power business, do me one favor, read a book called The Grid. It was on Bill Gates' 2016 book read list, like summer reading list, Gretchen Baki. Read that book. Understand the fundamentals of the power grid. Understand that this is a power industry. This is not an app industry. This is not a sales industry. This is a power and infrastructure business. If you don't have that as a fundamental, then you're lost from the beginning, and you're only thinking about gaming the system to try to make money, which at the end of the day is going to mean you're going to end up probably going to make money, probably going to look for something else because it won't fill that hole for you. The people I've seen succeed in this industry, I'm thinking about Bruce as an example from BMR Energy. His interview was phenomenal, where we talked about how his grooming as a power market and trader expert helped him to build a solar company that thrives. I could give so many examples, but the future of the energy business is renewables, backstop as firm power with what we can't even. I don't think we can really imagine it right now, like what storage is capable of. I'm so excited for September and Battery Day from Elon, as we probably all are, because I want to hear what they've got coming up.
We covered that in the news today, yeah.
Energy, yeah. So the energy storage is the next frontier. Like chemistry is what's going to change everything. The sun's already there. The wind's already there. How we hold it and how we dispatch it is the next evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have 2 thoughts there. I've done a lot of quotes over the years for cold storages and farmers and industrial utility rate schedules. And what I found is that you can produce them on an annual basis, kilowatt hours, and offset it, but without managing the load, you're still left with demand charges. And until you can solve that problem, there are many people who would have otherwise done solar. Many of these cold storages, there are hundreds of them where we are, as well as thousands of farmers with pumps that use a ton of electricity, but they can't manage that demand. And solar really only offsets the low cost kilowatt hours, and the majority of their bill is demand. So there's exciting times. As well, I believe solar and storage together, solar plus storage, will create an opportunity for remote regions to create value for land that otherwise can't have utilities brought to it, kind of the last mile problem. And we talked to Liquid Star about that. And then another thought I have, you kind of inspired me to think of, was Jason Rodriguez from Z Prime. He said, if you want to go far, he said, if you want to go fast, go low. If you want to go far, take the high road. It's something like that. And so you reminded me of that. And so I'm anxious to hear your response to this last question. Question number 10. In these trying times, do you have a favorite quote or something uplifting you could share?
Yeah, I'm gonna thread together a few quotes here, because as I mentioned to you before, I'm a bit of a quote whore. And if you're a member of the Clean Energy Guild, you're going to see me throwing in memes of quotes all the time, because I can't help it. So I'm going to read to you a few quotes that I think tie really well to this whole idea of uplifting, but also inspirational and meaningful. So Henry Ford said, "You can't build a reputation on what you're going to do." H. Jackson Brown said, "Don't waste time," and I would say, therefore, learning the tricks of the trade. Instead, learn the trade. And Zig Ziglar famously said, "Make failure your teacher, not your undertaker." I mentioned earlier Branson. Branson, for me, is such an inspirational figure, modern day hero in my book from an entrepreneurial perspective. One of my favorite quotes from him is, "Train people well enough so that they can leave, and treat them well enough so they don't want to."
Wow, very impressive. Wow, you could write a book on those and go into detail on how impressive those thoughts and philosophies and beliefs would be. I really like that, Nico, and I really enjoy your time. And again, I want you to thank your wife for me, because I know you guys are sheltering in place. You have children. You're down in Mexico, and you're taking the time to come on the show, which is great. Our audience is similar to yours. They like to learn, and you have a lot to teach. So I appreciate your time. And so if you're listening, I encourage you to join us at facebook.com/CIG Solar. You can also find us on LinkedIn, follow us on YouTube, follow us anywhere on social media that you like to do business or have fun. And that is it for the Energy Independence Show. The revolution is here. Thank you for joining us. Feel free to like, comment, and share. And thank you again, Nico, for joining us.
Yeah, I'll say gong that bell. Subscribe to these guys. They're
right.
doing good
Where can
stuff.
they find you?
Well, that's yeah. We're I always end up the show with something that you reminded me just now. A philomath is someone who is kind of like a polymath, someone who is learning from many different spaces. So I say, if you, my fellow philomath, are eager to learn more, you can find the show notes, the social media, and everything else at mysuncast.com. And again, I would encourage folks to join your Facebook group, your LinkedIn group. I know that you're going to, in some way, graciously share the ways that we're impacting the world. So I'll leave that for you. We're proud of folks like you that are coming up through the ranks and earning their stripes. I just want to, again, just say one more time and edify. You're doing amazing work, man. The quality is good. The production and timing is good. Stay consistent. Consistency is key in life. So I just really honored to have been able to join you for this time, and so grateful for the audience that stuck around till this moment. As I always say, you are what you listen to.
Absolutely. And my producer, Richard Forrester, says content every day. It doesn't matter. Get on there. And during this pandemic, I give him credit for keeping me true and keeping me on track. And I would encourage everyone to have a positive attitude and to keep trying and to keep doing and just go for it. So as Liquid Star says, just do. And again, Nico, I encourage you, or I appreciate your wife. I encourage you to say thank you. And that's it for the Energy Independence Show. And we will talk to you later, Nico. We have some important issues to discuss for our industry. So we will share those with the world here soon here in California. And again, thank you for your time, and we will see you all later. See you soon.